6.5 million animals enter shelters each year. Less than half get adopted. The pandemic and staffing shortages have only made things worse. Across our area, things look dire for homeless pets and the people who work to care for them. It's time to talk about how we can make a difference.
Welcome to Around the Table with Animal Advocates, an exclusive KPRC2 Plus roundtable discussion. I'm Zach Lazway. Thank you for joining us. Today we will chat about a handful of topics impacting shelters, rescues, pet owners, and you at home. With us in Studio A is Brent Tollner, Senior Director of National Programs with Best Friends Animal Society, a national nonprofit animal welfare organization that works with shelters and rescue groups and members throughout the country to promote pet adoption, no-kill animal rescue, and spay and neuter practices. Corey Stottlemyre, Deputy Shelter Director with BARC, is also here. The City of Houston's only shelter required by law to accept every animal that comes through its doors. BARC says it is dedicated to pet adoption and a live release initiative. Macy Stays is a marketing coordinator with Houston Humane Society, which works to end animal cruelty, abuse, and overpopulation in Houston. And Judge Mark Keogh from Montgomery County, thank you all for being here today. We really appreciate it. And also thank you for the work you do every day. Hundreds of thousands of people dedicate their lives to animal advocacy, and we are honored and fortunate to have you with us today to talk about animal welfare in Houston for the next 60 minutes or so. This is a really exciting opportunity. It's a first for us. I'm excited. I think you guys are excited. I hope you're excited.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Let's talk about what is going on in shelters right now. Okay. This is going to be an open discussion. You can chime in, you can chime in, you get to chime in, and you, sir, get to chime in. We all can talk about what's going on. Would we call what is happening in shelters across the country right now a crisis?
I would say absolutely we call it a crisis. And from a national perspective, what we're seeing is, particularly for dogs, I think the story for cats this year has actually been pretty good across the board. But for dogs, we're seeing about a 10% increase in dogs coming into shelters from the year prior. But adoptions aren't keeping up. They aren't catching up. So we're only seeing about 5.5% increase in adoptions on a national level. What that's done is created a bottleneck. So shelters that would normally be able to receive animals coming in, there's a bottleneck there, so they're not able to transport as many animals out, which then, so shelters like BARC that rely very heavily on transporting animals for positive outcomes, that outlet's been kind of shut off for them. And so what we're seeing in Houston and Texas in general, and Houston specifically, is just sort of the downhill effect of all of that. Like, they're struggling with the adoptions in the same way, they're struggling with intakes in a lot of the same way, and because the transports are now down 17%, that's creating even a bigger bottleneck for them.
Brent, why is that? I know you lend that perspective from a national perspective. You're very familiar with the Houston market, having worked here in years past. But when you look at that, this is a microcosm of what's going on across the country. Why are adoptions down?
You know, I think there are probably a variety of reasons that there's all a little bit of truth to it. And, you know, I think the economy obviously plays a role in all of this.
Absolutely.
Because inflation, people are kind of reticent to get a pet right now because the cost of care has gone up.
Everything has gone up. Dog food has gone up. Access to affordable vet care is
That's a big one.
Through the roof.
Yeah, and so it's huge, and so like that's a big factor for it. Housing is a big factor for it because one of the primary reasons people lose their pets or are separated from their pets is because they lose their rental housing or whatever, and it's harder to find housing for pets. And then also it's on the shelter level, so the same staffing shortages that we've seen across the board in every other industry is affecting shelters, and so they're not able to provide necessarily the same level of interactions with the animals on a daily basis or with adopters that are coming in. And so it's all of these factors are kind of combining to cause that backup.
Before I move on to these guys, I just want to ask you one more question. When looking at the problem as a whole, and then you look at Houston, obviously we are not immune to what is happening, but would you say what is happening across the country is worse here in Houston?
It's worse here because, as a general rule, shelters in the south transfer animals to the shelters in the north, and so that transport element is substantially worse. So while it's down 17% nationwide, it's down 26% in the state of Texas. And so it's just that incrementally more. So it's the same impact, but probably worse here.
With that, I want to toss things over to Corey Stottlemyre, Deputy Shelter Director with BARC. Paint the picture.
So just kind of bouncing off of that, at the shelter we compared, pre-pandemic numbers 2019 to last calendar year 2021. Adoptions were down nearly 30%. Rescue pools dropped as well. Animals being taken out through foster care as well. A lot of those same factors you talked about. And we know in a city like Houston, if certain rental properties might have breed restrictions, we know the type of animals that we offer at BARC, the type it might be prohibited from some of these areas. So when you have those factors from the economy to staffing, we've been operating about 20% deficit. At one point it was high as almost 40% last calendar year in 2021. And that's predominantly in our frontline, our customer service, our animal care technician staff who are interacting with both the public and the animals. And so our capacity at the shelter is based on our staffing levels. So if our staffing levels are lower, the amount of animals that we can safely care for, both safely for the animals, but our staff as well, that's decreases.
And remind people of what your capacity is.
So total numbers, when we have in our South Adoption video area, we have some dividers. If we drop them, it's above 500, but we try to keep those dividers up.
623, I think, is a number that sticks out to me, 627.
We try to, based on staffing though, ideally be about 250 to 275.
So significantly less.
But we consistently go over that just based on, this year alone, we've seen a 25% increase in how many animals are being brought in as strays from our enforcement team. And that impacts, the type of inventory we have, because we prioritize, the most aggressive, the calls where people are at risk by animals. So that's the type of animal we're overwhelmingly bringing in that affects essentially our inventory for what's up for adoption.
We're going to get much more on that in just a moment. Macy, did you want to weigh in on painting the picture for Houston Humane?
Yeah, I mean, for Houston Humane, our capacity is much smaller than BARC. We are a nonprofit completely funded by donations, so we are not city funded at all. While our capacity is smaller, I think we're still seeing a lot of the issues that BARC does see, where we're just out of room. Our staffing, we're seeing a decrease in the amount of people who are able to work right now, and it's been hard to transition everything the way it needs to be. Take that animal from intake to the clinic to the adoption floor, and then market them to be adopted. The large dogs are where we see the issue. It's the puppies are still being adopted. The kittens are still being adopted. It's our large 2-3-year-old animals, dogs, who we're saying, a really hard time getting them out.
And those are dogs larger than 40 pounds?
Yes.
Typically?
Most of the time.
Most of the time. And I can tell you, being an owner of Sullia St. Bernard, big dogs obviously take up a lot of space. However, they are great apartment dogs. Very few of these large breeds require a lot of exercise. And so I know the one walk around the block is not only good for me, but it's also good for him. He doesn't have to go much further than that. Mark Keogh is judge up in Montgomery County. I know you're not affiliated necessarily with a shelter or rescue. You spend a lot of time at Montgomery County Animal Services volunteering your time.
Well, I took over that on behalf of the Commissioner's Court and got involved with our people. It's easy for people to sit outside and complain about what's going on and what we should be doing or shouldn't be doing. And to be quite honest with you, I just got tired of all the complaints, and nobody was taken up for the people in the shelter. And I watch these guys, they come and go, they work long, long hours, and to try and do what they're skilled at. And so once I got down there and got involved in it, all the things that you're saying is what has taken place. It is a crisis going on. The volunteer issue is a huge problem. Yeah. And as I think about that, just getting people to come out and volunteer, how do we create an environment that makes somebody want to come out and volunteer? We actually have people that come out full-time volunteer. I mean, that's remarkable to me. But
those people are fewer and fewer as time goes on,
yes,
as we go deeper into these issues.
But here's the deal. For us, I just, we have to decide, being with my business background, now coming in as county judge and then doing this, is that we have to decide, okay, this is what's going on. Are we going to contract, or are we going to embrace it and figure out new ways to increase our rate of travel? Now, what I mean by ready to travel is how many are coming in against how many are going out.
Right.
And the fact of the matter is that it is going to take the people in charge of these shelters to think out of the box on how we get them adopted, how we are able to continue with transports. What does it take to create those relationships all over the country? You were talking about our guys, Aaron and Mark. They do such a good job at this because they have contacts. I mean, Aaron just was in Washington. He made contacts out in Washington State. We're sending 140 something animals up to Delaware this next week.
Yeah, we're going to hear from Aaron coming up in the show.
It's pretty awesome.
You know, you bring up a lot of...
But it's tough. It's a tough deal.
You bring up a lot of questions, a lot of concerns. What are some solutions to some of these questions, some of these concerns with having fewer and fewer people coming in to help you out? You know, you talk about providing a service, but you can only provide a service based upon the people you have. What are some solutions to get people in to help out with these initiatives?
Part of it is, you know, we focus a lot, I think, digitally on, you know, our built-in social media channels. It's tapping into our partners, like being a part of a conversation like this, but working together, I think, is crucial. Also finding ways to expand our wellness services to kind of target the source of the issue in terms of expanding free spay-neuter services to the community. We're lucky here at Houston, we have Healthy Pets, Healthy Streets. For qualifying residents, you can get free spay or neuter services. That'll help us in terms of, you know, the pet population in the area.
And before we move on, where can people go to access that?
HoustonBark.com. You can go online. If you qualify, you can schedule an appointment. We work with external partners, so Humane Society, as well as SNAP works with us to set up those appointments.
So that's one solution. Any other solutions?
I think that when we talk about a decrease in volunteering, I think that there's just a lack of mentioning the shelter's names when it comes to young people. I think that we are so lucky here in Houston to have many colleges and universities, you know, within our reach, and young people care about this issue. This is something that's you're getting passionate people in. They just don't know how to help. I know that was the issue for me. I was in college and I knew that I wanted to adopt because I knew it was the right thing to do, but I didn't know how to go about that, where to go about that, or what even to do about the issue that I could see. I could see the stray animals. I went to U of H in 3rd Ward, you know, so I could see them on the streets and I wanted to help. I just didn't know how. I think it's a huge part of our responsibility as animal welfare organizations to get into our community and let people know, this is an issue. Here's how you can help us. Instead of, well, like you said, blaming it on the people working in the shelter, it's a huge community issue as well.
That's a really great point. You and I were talking about this in maybe yesterday, the day before on the phone, and that is, you know, adoption, I think, is like the top. It's the top way to get involved, if you will. But there are so many other ways to do that, whether it be fostering, volunteering your time. And volunteering your time doesn't mean just showing up to these shelters or rescues and cleaning out cages or pens.
Right.
This could be marketing. There are so many different opportunities.
Absolutely. As a marketing professional in the animal welfare space, it's huge. When people think of a shelter dog, they think of an old dog who, you know, maybe doesn't have much time left or whatever that, you know, a set idea is. The truth of the matter is, every kind of dog can be found in a shelter, from the fluffy, cute designer breeds to the pit bull, if that's your thing. And it is a lot of people's thing. I mean, I could go on that whole tangent. They're the sweetest guys.
A whole other hour.
Yeah. But you can find whatever you're looking for in a shelter. I came across a couple people who said, well, it just wasn't the right fit for me. I have children. I think that that's an uneducated statement, and that's our fault as, you know, animal welfare organizations. We're not getting out into the community and, you know, educating them on it can be whatever you need. Have that conversation with us. Tell us what you want. If you're wanting a dog or a cat that's going to get along with your children, we can help you. We have dogs in fosters with children. We have dogs thousands. We have cats in fosters with children. So
Taking accountability, responsibility, our part in this, right? I like that. Is there anything, Brent, you want to say before we toss things to Brent?
I would love to, because the one thing that I would love to, because Corey mentioned this a little bit about controlling the number of animals that are coming into the shelter, because like there's the control of animals coming out, but there's also the control of animals coming in. And so what a lot of shelters have done, I think Montgomery County has done a tremendous job of this, of making an appointment-based intake. So if an animal's in dire need, they'll triage them, bring them in so that they can get the immediate life-saving care that they need. But if it's an owner-surrendered pet and there's a time limit, there's some time to work with, they're working with owners to help them so they can maybe rehome the pet themselves or get them vaccinated before they come into the shelter so they can stay healthier when they get to the shelter. And those types of managed admission programs are really important on the shelter side. A lot of shelters are doing some more of these. And I think the public needs to understand, like, these people care passionately about the animals that they're caring for, and this is one of their solutions of like helping the public do more on their side of it so that the shelter's not the solution for everything that comes in.
You know, one of the issues is that as it continues and the amount of animals coming in rises, you know, many people think, well, we just need to do a new shelter. Let's just make a bigger shelter. The problem with that is if you don't have processes in place to move them out just as you're moving them in, and as I call it, rate of travel, so it makes sense, less coming in than going out. If you don't do that, all you're doing is adding a bigger place to add more dogs, and all you're going to do, and cats, and you're just going to increase the amount. The answer isn't always build something new. It's really working
Or
on
bigger.
It's on processes.
Yeah.
What do we need to do to, for instance, you talk about volunteers. Not too long ago, I got up, we started a ministry at our church, the animal shelter ministry. This is no joke. And we have people coming down from the church, and what they do on Wednesdays is they walk dogs. They go online, they can volunteer, and it's just developing. It's in its amoeba stage. But this is the kind of out-of-box stuff I'm thinking about. Over, like you mentioned, the youth. You're right on that, man. The college kids, Lone Star College and some of these others, and reaching out to them to get them to come out. And then, of course, then your problem is you got to have a great volunteer coordinator on the program to make it work. So,
Well, and I think that was a big thing for us, is finding ways to get out into the community. I kind of mentioned, you know, we use the channel. A lot of people go on our website digitally through social media to promote our services. We're trying to find ways. We're lucky to get a grant in the new year. We'll be making an announcement, but it's to help us fund translation services to reach people who might be impacted by the language barrier, and also get print materials to actually empower some of our staff and volunteers to go out in communities.
Oh, that's a great advancement. Yeah.
Yeah, especially we're working with the City of Houston. We have the Complete Communities. We'll be working directly with them to get connected with community experts as well, those like trusted sources in the community to help share the message as well, to actually make sure we're reaching audiences that were impacted by the digital divide and the language barrier.
It all starts with a conversation. We're having that conversation right now. It's a great conversation so far. This conversation is going to continue, but they always say the problems are always bigger in Texas, and data shows Texas leads the nation with the most animals at risk. Why live outcomes are down in Texas, and what you can do to change this. That's ahead. Welcome back to Around the Table with Animal Advocates, an exclusive KPRC2 Plus roundtable discussion. Local and national industry experts from shelters, rescues, and animal advocacy groups are here to discuss the ongoing crisis in shelters and rescues with overcrowding and overwhelming need. Right now, Texas leads the nation with the most animals at risk. According to Best Friends Animal Society, live outcomes are down in Texas, and in Houston specifically has larger decreases in overall life-saving measures, as well as a greater decrease in dog save rate than the national average. With us is a panel of experts, both locally and nationally. The question to you all, why? Why is this? Who wants to take it?
I can start things off. I will speak at BARC. We've seen,
On behalf of Houston.
Yes.
Yeah.
So since 2020, we've seen a significant drop in a lot of outcomes at the shelter, but the amount of animals coming in stays steady. We did implement, you mentioned earlier, Brent, scheduled intake. So we do have scheduled intake, and we were able to manage that number.
Also called managed intake, right?
Yes, that's correct. Yeah. So people in the community who might be returning a pet, or they find one and want to bring it in, you can go on our website and schedule an appointment from there. But in terms of our enforcement team, they have increased. We looked earlier, fiscal year, we compared the previous to this summer, and they had increased the amount of animals they were bringing in by 34%. I think to date, overall this calendar year, we're somewhere around 25% more being brought in from our enforcement team. I mean, we have a commitment to public safety. It is what we were built upon. We also have a commitment to live release, but we were built around a public safety initiative for our communities who are impacted by stray animals. And so we were able to add 4 new officers last year, and that's had a result in the amount of animals being brought into the shelter. So when you increase, the stray intake at the shelter, but you have a decrease in animals being pulled by fosters and rescues, it's going to have a result. And unfortunately, we have the ultimate decision to make, live release and euthanasia.
We're going to dive deeper into your numbers right now. I want to take a look at some of your euthanization rates. I know you touched upon some of those numbers. We're going to look at these a little more closely. In 2019, 3,000 animals, this is including cats and dogs, were euthanized in BARC's care. In 2020, that number dropped significantly to 924. Last year went up to 1026. Where are we this year, and why are those numbers where they're at?
So I will say from our live release rate last year was still above 90%, even with that number slightly upticking. This year we looked at, I think calendar year is around 85%, so it has dropped a bit in terms of live release. We still are overwhelmingly getting animals out of the shelter, but still the amount has decreased. I consider many factors in that: the continued staffing capacity issues, the pandemic. When we saw 2020, we were operating with a skeleton crew. So you could see that in the data. The amount of animals coming through the shelter was reflective of the amount of staff in the community as well, picking up animals. This year, we've actually seen a slight uptick in adoptions, very slight. But again, that's just still behind pre-pandemic numbers as well. So it's still overall, outcomes are low for us.
Before we move on, Judge, I do want to say, hot off the press, your at-glance numbers, thank you for getting them to us very quickly. I know these are for November. We're only a week into December, but from November 1st to November 30th, 255 animals were euthanized. Again, I think a lot of people, when they hear these numbers, they're going to argue that some of these pets are very adoptable pets. What would you say to that, and where do we go from here?
I'm not going to always argue with that, especially if we're at a point where we are at capacity. We will have to make the tough decision to add our longest length of stay, is what the category we call it, to we have an urgent pets list, and Code Red is the ultimate list of animals that are at risk that day for euthanasia. So in, lower capacity times, we might be only focusing on animals with severe medical or behavioral issues. But when we were reaching capacity, I talked about those dividers. When we put those down, that decreases kennel space in the shelter, which has an impact on animals that stay there for a longer amount of time. So if their behavior starts to deteriorate, that might more quickly qualify them for our urgent pets list.
Corey, I know you mentioned earlier the capacity was 623, low sixes.
And that includes kennel space for chickens and
other
horse
animals,
stables.
the other
exactly.
box.
Right?
Yeah, right. We had well-documented tiger case in the past.
Snakes, yes,
Yeah,
of
yeah.
course, tigers in Houston. But when we hear the number 255, and when you mentioned earlier, that's about the capacity you're at now, right, with 255 animals? But when you hear that many were euthanized in 1 month, you look at that number and you look at this number and you're like, whoa. So are these all animals going in and out, and then they're getting new ones and they're being...
We bring in animals every day. We're
Right.
So more animals are coming in from our enforcement team every day. We have
How many on a daily basis? If you
It
had
can range from anywhere between 50, we've had as high as 80, up to 100 some days. And that's in addition to not just the enforcement, but also, like we said, the scheduled intake. Or if somebody's turning in an animal that is sick, it's fading, it's injured, we will never reject those animals. We always accept them as well.
Yeah.
I know we were talking earlier when we were talking about inbox complaints and people
Yes.
writing in with questions and concerns. We also field a lot of these questions, not only on behalf of BARC, but a lot of organizations across all different industries. But one particular topic that we get a lot of emails about we tried going to BARC, but we were turned away. We were turned down. This goes in line with what you're saying about managed intake. scheduled intake. For people not familiar with what that means, why that was brought about, tell us.
So it's a trend, I know Brent mentioned, that a lot of shelters are moving towards. It's
Not just here in Houston, not just here in Texas,
Yes.
but across the board.
Yes.
That is correct. So it allows us to set a determined amount of spots available to the public each day to schedule an appointment to bring in an animal. So it is one area we can slightly have control over in terms of intake. That's because, like we said, we see that great number coming in still stray from the field. In Houston, it's no secret we have a huge population out in the community that is still coming in. We know there are dedicated animal street rescues who are also picking up animals. At the end of the day, we do have our capacity, and we want to be doing our due diligence to the hardworking staff to keep things safe on property as well for them.
He mentioned street issues. Do we have a solution to get ahead of this problem before it reaches these numbers? Do we have a solution on how we can address this issue before it gets to a shelter?
You know, I think one of the things when we talk about street issues, and this is one of the advantages of like getting to bounce around to different areas of the country, like the city of Dallas did a big study because they had the same street issues that we talk about in Houston a lot. And what they found is that about 80% of the animals that they found on the streets, roaming the streets, actually had a home.
How many? 80%?
About 80%.
80%.
So they were able to actually find a home that was identified with that pet. So what we're seeing is like these are pets with owners. They're just not being responsibly contained and within the community. And so this becomes where some of the stuff that your field officers are doing and your field officers are doing are having conversations about like what does proper maintaining of a pet so that they're properly behind a fence. Can we repair the fence if it needs to be repaired? Keeping them indoors if that's a possibility, like, but just not letting them out roam around the neighborhood like that. That is in some different parts of the community and within different, just the way people grew up and the way people like were just raised with pets may dictate how they determine to care for them. And so it's part of those conversations in the community, I think, are really important.
And what we've done too is that earlier this year, City Council approved a change to our ordinance to require mandatory microchipping. So the idea is if our enforcement officers do encounter a stray in the field, they have the chip readers that they can use, and if it is chipped, as it's required now by city ordinance, they can reunite it with its owners. So it never has to come to the shelter. That's the ultimate goal with that change in ordinance.
You know, we have a couple of our guys who are bilingual, and so they'll go out and they'll respond to calls and whatnot by dispatch. But then they get out there and they will get with these people and basically teach them about how this should be done. And from my conversations with them, it's pretty remarkable. People respond to it, they just don't know. They're used to getting a dog or 2 or 3 dogs and just letting them run. They come back for the food, and then the guy down the street is this pack of dogs is coming down attacking him, and they're not bad dogs. But when they get together as a pack, it's a problem. They're not educated. And so we've got a couple of our guys that are literally in the field when they go out into certain areas of Montgomery County and are addressing this and giving them literature and talking to them about this
People
stuff.
want to do better.
That's right. Yeah,
People
that's great
care
outreach,
about
yeah.
animals,
Yeah.
and we see most likely the trend is that people want to make sure their pet is safe. We run a program called Pet Pantry, and so our main mission is to keep families together. When people have to make that difficult decision, a lot of times it's because they can't afford the basic, needs of the pet, food,
Right.
wellness, all of that. And so what we do is we go out into every area of our surrounding community and our immediate community, and we offer pet supplies, pet resources. We have a whole pet resources department. I mean, we have most recently worked with DoorDash to even get the people who are not mobile, so people who cannot leave their homes.
that's great.
We are delivering food to them so that they don't have to surrender their companions that live with them. And I think that's another huge conversation is what are we doing as people who can no longer house all of the animals that our community can no longer take care of? How are we assisting them in taking care of their animals? I know that BARC has awesome resources as far as, you know, their wellness clinic and Healthy Pet, Healthy Streets, which we work with them on. I think Pet Pantry is a huge part of just the basic needs. You know, how are you going to feed your dog tomorrow? We can help you. If you go onto HoustonHumane.org, all of our information for pet resources is on there. You can actually sign up if you qualify. You know, one of our pet resources coordinators will get in touch with you, and we'll figure out how to get pet food to you one way or another, because our main goal is to keep pets who have living homes in their families.
In their homes.
A lot of the times when you come into our intake department, you know, you see people who are having the worst day of their lives, struggling with the decision that they're making to give up their family member.
Right.
And it is so heartbreaking as an animal welfare professional to see that happen, and as a human, because these people love their animals and they want to take care of them. They just don't know the best way. It's our job to do that, to make sure that they do know.
My friend Carrie McKeel, who's watching off camera, she always says to me, we're here to set up both ends of the leash for success. Did I do it well? Yeah, she gave you a thumbs up. No, but it's true, you know, and that goes right along with what you're saying with your outreach programs. Again, though, it's getting the word out about those, because we're all sitting here, we're all like, oh, wow, yeah, that's really good.
The Humane Study will be at Bark on Saturday for a Pet Pantry event.
There's another element to this that we're really not talking much about, and that has to do with fostering.
Yeah.
You know, as I was looking at the numbers today, we've got 427 animals, we've got 398 dogs and 29 cats. That's there today. And anything we've taken in or we've outed. The other side of that is, though, we've got almost 200 fosters out. And that's not ones that are going out. These are people, and the amazing thing about it, I mean, it's almost like a car. They get it, they foster it, they can't give it up. And, you know, and certainly we don't want to do that, because there's plenty of good people that just want to foster dogs until they can get them adopted out. So that's, for us, that's huge.
We're going to talk a little more about that in just a moment, but first I want to continue on with euthanizations impacting a shelter's live release rate. This index measures the percentage of positive outcomes for animals entering the shelter. And when we say positive outcomes, we're talking about adoptions, animal returns, and transfers. Right. Putting an animal down is a negative outcome. The live release rate does not take into account animals who died, were put down because of health reasons at the request of owners. Corey, I know 2 years ago, again, going off of some of the stats that you sent over, again, all these stats can be found on your website, the city's website, so it's public information, very transparent here. These are springboards, though, for us to talk about the greater issue here. But if you go back 2 years ago, you had a record-breaking year for live release rate at 95.5%. I was told in Matthew round that number up, but good for you for keeping it where it's at. Last year, that number dropped slightly to 94.1%. This year, those numbers have dropped significantly. Why and what can be done?
I think what we're talking about today, you know, those factors of the outcomes based on, you know, the economy right now, and with inflation, the cost of pet ownership is prohibitive for some people. I think we talked about fostering, you talked about young audiences. I think that's a great option for them. It's not a permanent always option, but you don't have to have a pet fostered for a very lengthy amount of time. Sometimes just a short period of time to get a stressed animal out of the stressful shelter environment into a calmer, quieter environment where it can thrive, and then some marketing from that foster to get it ultimately adopted is a, you know, easier process for some. I think that's something we are trying to focus on internally, is expanding again our foster program. Fostering and volunteering took a huge hit during 2020 and 2021. We still saw the number decrease. Yeah. And we're trying to build back up both of those. We're actually partnering with Best Friends. Reagan and your team has been embedded with our volunteer coordinator to look at ways we could set up a tiered program. That way some of our more dedicated volunteers, like you said, we have people who come in daily, come in every weekend and market our animals, the ones who are on our urgent pets list, setting up based on their hours, their experience, their animal handling training, putting them at higher tier categories, and working internally with us to find ways to build our existing programs, our adoptions, our promotions for fostering, stuff like that.
You know, adoption and fostering, that's introducing new pets to the family, but you mentioned obviously those things being prohibitive factors for people who are looking to potentially foster or adopt. But when you look at this, where does that number stand for owner surrenders? People who are, you know, not able to take care of the dog they've had, the cat they've had for years. When we look at these percentages, where does that stand? Owner surrenders.
Since we've had managed intake, that's kind of, I guess, inflated our way of looking at that, because overall the intakes have decreased because we have the managed intake now. But I would say we heard it a lot in 2021 and this year as well. I know a lot of our partners have asked us, did people who were at home or maybe who were
Pandemic
working,
puppies.
yep,
Pandemic puppies, yeah.
came and
That's a term.
we saw like the 2020 number was still relatively high, but now people are at a point where they've returned to work, or as the economy has turned, they realize they can't keep this pet anymore.
And the pandemic was hard for all of us to stay in our houses, but also it created I guess a culture of dogs who were raised with their human
Around
only
all the time.
in their house
Yeah, right.
all the
That's
time.
right.
We are seeing a huge increase in our wellness clinic of people coming in saying, my dog is breaking out of her kennel. She's destroying our mattresses. She's destroying our pillows. Why is that happening? It's because you were there all the time. And now they're trying to figure out where you've gone. Separation anxiety is a huge, huge issue with canines. And that's why we're seeing pandemic puppies, which is the term for, those puppies adopted from the shelters or bought in 2020 being surrendered to shelters,
surrendered.
which is why we've seen a huge uptick in designer breeds in shelters. People were at home and bought animals, and then now they don't know what to do with them, and that's becoming the shelter's problem.
There are many similarities between being a pet parent and a parent of children. Teaching them and reteaching them things that they've never known is part of the course. For this whole thing. Anything you want to say, Brent?
The one thing I do want to come back to it's when we talk about euthanasia rate, and we were talking particularly about Bark. Like a shelter like Barks is never going to have a zero euthanasia rate. There are always going to be animals that come in that were hit by a car, that are too badly injured to be saved, or that are just too aggressive to be responsibly rehomed out in the community. And that's for the municipal government shelters. That's kind of their responsibility, is to be sure to make those decisions and to be there for those animals where euthanasia is truly the best option for either the animal or for the community. Best Friends is one of the largest national organization that talks about no-kill. And
Save them all is your slogan.
Save them all is our slogan. And so we use the 90% benchmark.
90%?
90% as a save rate, as a benchmark for that, knowing that 10% gives probably enough wiggle room for the vast majority of shelters.
Do you think that's realistic?
Yeah, we're seeing it across the country. Yeah. So right now, about over 50% of the shelters across the country, this includes private shelters, includes municipal shelters, are above that 90% threshold. That doesn't mean it's easy, and it doesn't mean that there isn't work to do. And again, like we've talked about earlier on, like what's happening in the Houston area is a microcosm of what's happening nationally, and I feel like it's even worse here, and probably even more challenging for a shelter like Bark, because you all were very reliant on transport as a large part of your positive outcomes. And so the more that the community can be a part of the solution, so they can be less reliant on animals necessarily having to be sent to other places, I think the better off. And so I just wanted to make it clear that when we talk about that 250 number for them, some of those animals, that was probably the best outcome for them.
And it's mentioned that adoptions are slightly increased this year, but our transfer to rescues has dropped by like 20%.
Yeah.
It's continuing to go down year by year. And that, I think, is the biggest sign of a nationwide issue. If the shelters up north are at capacity, if fosters are not able to, if rescues can't rely on the ones they've traditionally relied on, and there's nowhere for those animals to go, that's when we see fewer pools.
It bottlenecks the whole system.
Exactly.
When you do
Cyclical.
that, do you go and you participate in these events where you transport? Do you just transport them, or do you participate in massive adoption events? For instance, this one we're going to, we're going to be there and adopting out dogs. We're just not turning them loose with whoever's the recipient. Sometimes we'll take them and, just take them, okay, here they are. You got to package them up, put them all together the way we do. But Aaron and Mark, on this next one they're actually going up to adopt these dogs out in that area. Intention, they won't bring any back. They've agreed to take them all, but we've got a whole staff of people going to do it.
From your perspective, is that solving the problem or just passing the problem off?
So I think it's a short-term solve to the solution that we have. I don't think it's a permanent solution. I think, particularly for city the size of Houston, there's 5 million people in the metropolitan area. Like, there are enough adopters here locally. The pets came from the community locally, and I think in some ways we have a responsibility to adopt those animals back out in the community that they came from, and do it in a way that they're now vaccinated and spayed and neutered and that sort of thing, which sort of controls some of these other population elements out of it. But I think it's a triage right now for the larger crisis of a lot of the shelters here being understaffed and under capacity and under resourced for many, many years. And so we're struggling to catch up. And so it's a triage in the moment type of thing.
Corey, you mentioned the city ordinance. I'm so sorry, Macy. Did you want to weigh in?
No, you're good.
Earlier you mentioned the new ordinance for microchipping.
Yes.
Is that an ordinance adopted from another city, looking at what they're doing, looking to see what's working for them? Is that where the idea came from? And if so, or if not, is there a city doing this with spay and neuter? And is that something to get ahead of the problem?
We have looked at what other cities are doing. I think the ordinance changes that we impacted here, part of them were done with external partner input. We worked with Texas Humane Legislative Network. That was part of our change too, was change to pet stores and where they source their animals from humane organizations, like a shelter. That was a change we made this year as well, earlier in the year. We also adopted a lot of the state level changes into our own ordinance, and that was in terms of humane, outdoor space for an animal, so providing it from a safe space from the elements, even if it is outdoors, no chains.
Safe Outdoor Act.
Yes, yeah, and we adopted that into our own ordinance. So in terms of looking externally, I know you mentioned Best Friends is a national organization. We partner with them regularly. We embed our staff. They've come and done assessments of the shelter, provided us with reports in that area, focusing across the board, our recommendation that we've incorporated into our shelter.
Awesome. I know one thing that you talked about earlier that many shelters across the nation are incorporating is this managed intake process, scheduled intake process. Sometimes when we do things, and a lot of people can join in on those things, doesn't mean it's the right thing. Do you truly believe managed intake is helping with our issues, or is it making the issues worse within the communities?
I think there's so many pros and cons, and you'd have to really sit there and weigh them out to come up with a definitive answer. But I think it works for some people and it doesn't work for others. I think that it's really hard to kind of put a generalized stamp on it and say managed intake doesn't work or it does work, because each community is different, and it changes month to month. So I think it all depends on where you're at and what you're doing.
And I would just say, like, I think it's in how it's executed, right? Like, you can execute anything well or poorly. And so when you were talking about, like, people going to the shelter and just surrender their pets, and like, this is the worst day of their life, and then to force them to wait in a line oftentimes until they can get, because they don't have an appointment. Now they're doing it in a busy lobby with other people waiting behind them, and it's like, maybe what they really need is they lost their job and they can't afford dog food or whatever, and you might be able to provide that to them.
Meeting them where they're at.
You're meeting them where they're at, but you can't have that conversation in a crowded lobby where somebody's like confessing their worst nightmare of surrendering their pet. And so that's why I'm a big proponent of it, of like, let's create a safe space for somebody to come in so we can have a real conversation so that we can fill the need. Because if the pet doesn't have to come to the shelter and it can stay in its home, that's the best outcome for everyone involved.
Are those conversations happening across the board with these organizations?
At Houston Humane, they are. Even when someone comes in and they don't have an appointment, what we're telling them is you can foster your animal until we do have space. We will provide all vet care, all resources. We will provide support, behavioral support. We have a behavior team. We're a shelter in Houston who has a behavior team, which is amazing. We will give you all of the resources that you need to hold that animal into your home until we have space to adopt them out in our shelter.
Love that. Okay, coming up, we're getting answers. What do you do if you find an animal on the street? Maybe you already have. Did you call your local municipality only to be told you need to call the county? We're talking with our experts on who to reach out to and where you can go to get help. We're back right after this.
Hi, Aaron Johnson, Director here at Montgomery County Animal Services, and we have something really cool going on this Friday. That's why we're getting these crates here ready. We have over 120 dogs that are going to be boarding a plane and heading on up to Delaware. Our friends over at Brandywine Valley SPCA have invited us to their mega adoption event, and we couldn't be more excited. We really love these mega adoption events. They're a lot of fun and they're highly successful, and we are really appreciative of Brandywine for inviting us to this event.
That was Aaron Johnson with Montgomery County Animal Services. Aaron, thank you very much. These types of transports Aaron is referring to take a lot of coordination and a lot of money. Being from the north, I recall seeing or hearing about these types of transports, especially before or after storms. My question, though, to you guys, to your expertise, why is this happening now? Obviously, the need is there. But again, being from the north, I recall very vividly these happening around the time of a major storm hitting the south. The need's there. Is it more than what's behind transports like this? Maybe this is.
When we had in Imelda or Katrina or whatever the hurricane was that ever took place, we had the whole convention center filled with dogs. We were shipping cattle to people's ranches that were in high ground. I mean, you wouldn't have believed what was going on out there. And because people don't have a place to put these animals in these crises. They're in crisis themselves. And so part of that is then they don't come to get their animals, and it accumulates over time. They've lost everything. So what they do is they just get everybody together and they just roll it. And they take them and they drop them off. So, I mean, that's ours. But again, the fostering with it is what makes it palatable to those guys. So, and my suggestion would be that you got to get your guys that are doing the transport to do that, to also foster.
Macy, earlier you were saying, one size does not fit all, and what works for you might not work for you. You were saying that this is certainly a solution for a short-term fix. You question the longevity here of it to some extent. I'm curious, what are your thoughts on this, on transports like this?
I think transport, it's a great option. People in the north, they're adopting out at a higher rate than people in the south. We also have a warmer climate, which promotes year-round breeding. So animals that aren't spayed and neutered, they're breeding way more often than the animals in the north that aren't spayed and neutered. So they do have a need for adoptable animals. But at some point, those numbers are going to decline. So we're going to have to figure out a different Band-Aid.
And I would say that 30 years ago, if we go back in the Wayback Machine, the low-cost spay and neuter programs that I think are somewhat commonplace today originated in the Northeast. And so they had a 20-year head start over what happened down in the South. And so we're still in the process of playing catch-up. And that's why I think it's more of a triage thing. And I will say the Brandywine Valley SPCA that you all are sending them to are one of the, they are the best in the country at doing adoptions. They're so great.
I know
the crisis isn't, we talk about how do we get rid of the crisis. Montgomery County, we're growing. We're growing so fast. That means people are coming in and they're bringing animals, and it's an ongoing continuation potential crisis. And that's why I just believe we have to master the processes for income and outgo and managed intake. You have to master it, because building bigger shelters isn't going to do it. All you're going to do is fill it with more animals. You got to have the processes that will work at any level. You know what I'm saying?
Sorry, I was just going to say it's very true. It's not the same to be an animal shelter today as it was 20 years ago.
Right.
There's a whole different conversation.
Like anything.
Yeah, right. There's a whole different conversation happening within the shelter as well as outside of it. So.
With that, I know you spend a lot of time, Judge, in the shelter, volunteering your time, but we are going to get to some video of you doing just that. You do this every week on social media. Macy, you were talking about getting the word out, meeting people where they are. I love, Judge, that you do this. While we watch these videos of you talking about these dogs once a week, right? You do this once a week. Let's talk about the budget too that you guys have up in Montgomery County.
Yeah, we have about $5.5 million budget, and quite honestly, 75 to 80% of that isn't walking, people and just getting people and doing what we do. But we've got a significant budget for what we do, and our guys manage it well. Again, our biggest issue with the budget, though, is getting keeping people there, getting them hired, and keeping them hired.
Retainment.
That's right. Retaining is an issue, and part of that has to do with recognition, making sure that it's clean, making sure that you've got the machinery, the stuff that we have done to remove the odor, just because animals are animals, has been incredible, and we spent a lot of money on that in terms of oxidation machines and fans and all kinds. But it's working. Works good.
And it's hard because it's hard emotional work.
It is.
Oh, yeah.
It's physical as well, but
Yeah.
I think the emotional toll that it takes on all of you that show up every day to do this, to only get the emails that are of complaints, it is tough work. It takes a really special person, and unfortunately, these are people who are not bringing home a tremendous amount of money and getting the recognition.
I would challenge everybody to do this and to pass this on. I know this, you're going to think I'm crazy, but when we get complaints, our commissioners were getting complaints. It was coming to commissioner's court. Our guys were getting complaints. Everybody's walking around defeated, getting beat up by everybody. And I said, nobody gets to take any more complaints. I want them to
That
come
jar's
directly
full,
to
right.
me.
Right.
And I respond to those complaints. My people will tell you. I'll pick up the phone, I'll call them, I'll explain. Just communicating with them is half the problem. They see an animal out there on the street, nobody's doing anything, they complain, nobody's still doing anything. If we just pick them up and explain the situation, they're probably owned by somebody, and then we'll send somebody out. Boom, problem solved. And the complaints have virtually gone away. I know it's hard to believe, but it's true.
I like it. I like it. Before we get to our final thoughts, I do have one question, and that's the question I posed right before we went to break. If you are out on the street and you find a pet, I know I've spent many live shots outside, and on a busy intersection, I will see dogs. And, you become panicked. You become panicked to see this. People write in all the time. We've called BARK. We've called Harris County. We've called X, Y, and Z. We're told no. There's a managed intake process in place. They have reasons. What should people do? Where do they start with their local municipality? Where do people go?
I want to start with, saying you should always check for a chip first.
Which requires you to bring the dog to the vet to see if they're chipped.
And there are 24/7 vets in Houston that you can access at any time that will go out to your car. You don't even have to bring the animal in and scan the chip.
Free of
for you.
charge?
Free of charge.
Free of charge.
And they will then contact the microchip company and get in touch. The microchip company gets in touch with the owner, and then the owner will have the information of the person who found the pet. So then I think that's the first step. Correct me if you guys think there's a different one.
We say the same thing. We have on our website, if you find an animal in the community, if you are reporting a stray or if there's an aggressive animal, call 311. That's how to report something for our enforcement team to come out and pick it up. But if you do pick up an animal, we say the same thing, or try to market it in your local neighborhood.
Nextdoor is a great resource, yeah.
That's one of our favorite tools at the shelter.
If you have a well-run managed intake system and the process is in place and everybody's on board and knows what it is, then when you have an exception to the rule where somebody's calling about an animal, you can take that animal in. We've instructed our guys in our commissioner's court with the amount of complaints that we're getting. The animal's out there, they call on you, go get it. Well, how do you keep doing that? You got to have a well-managed intake system, because many people say, okay, I'll keep it for a few days. I'll keep it here and bring it in. Won't euthanize it. We'll bring it in and we'll give it its age-appropriate vaccinations, and will help you, and they'll hang on to the animal if everybody's on the same page and you have a specific process in place to do it.
And I think, so a research study out of Dallas, again, coming back to it, they did research on the animals that they were returning, and basically they found that 85% of the animals that they found at the shelter that they were able to reunite with their owner was found within a half mile of their home. And so you think about a city this massive, like if somebody's pet gets hauled across town to BARK or to Montgomery County, or the fact that there are dozens of shelters here that the pet could potentially end up, like you're more likely to reunite that pet with its owner in the neighborhood. Right. So doing those things like working on Nextdoor, working on your Facebook neighborhood pages and that sort of thing, doing the microchip is should be your first attempt, and then if that falls through, now start working through the shelter on it. But more than likely, with a little bit of work, you can keep that pet in the neighborhood where it's most likely to find its home.
Brent, great point. It's hard to believe that this has been almost an hour. We've talked about a lot. There's still so much more to get to that we did not talk about, but I think this conversation was a great starting point. We talked about resources available for people, whether it be they need spay, neuter, affording dog food, affordable vet care. So we've talked about a lot. I want to leave you this. We have less than 2 minutes. Final thoughts with wrapping this conversation up. I want to start with you, Corey.
We talked about it a lot. This is a community. issue. It's not just a shelter issue, not just a rescue issue, a nonprofit issue. This is a community issue. So we all have to come together. We work together, we talk to each other, we partner on events, but it also takes the residents in our community sharing that information, letting others know when they see something like this, go to our websites and spread that with your community as well.
Macy?
I want to say that if you're thinking about adding a furry family member to your family, please consider adopting. Shelters aren't the scary place that they were portrayed as in your Disney movies when you were younger, as the Pound or that horrible Lady in the Tramp scene. Come down and see us. It's a positive experience, and you'll save a life.
There are many managers that look at a situation, see it as a crisis, and they automatically want to change people. And they want to start firing people. We just need to change who we have. And they don't ask this question, is this a people problem or a process problem? In most cases, it's a process problem. People want to do well. They just don't have the processes in place that are consistent to be able, if they have to go outside the norm and do something different, they don't know what to do, and that's where the complaints and crisis come in.
Brent, you have 30 seconds, sir.
It's a challenging time for everybody out there, particularly for the shelters in the Houston area. Again, what Casey said, it's a community problem. So anything that you can do, from what you think might be the smallest thing to the biggest thing, your help and support was going to be necessary and helpful for everybody to have the success that I think everybody, all Houstonians, want.
It's a community, and it takes a community to fix the problem, to talk about the problem, and move forward together. I want to thank you all for coming out and being part of today's discussion. I also want to thank you at home for watching. I hope today's conversation was enlightening, and of course, all the folks making a difference every day for our four-legged friends, thank you. You will be able to watch this discussion again on KPRC2+ and on clicktohouston.com. We'll see you next time.
Thanks, Zach.